Hi, Maya.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Today's podcast episode is sponsored by AGS Stainless, fabricated offsite, custom made all stainless steel railing systems. Why demand prefabrication for your custom rails? Whether you chose cable, glass, or rod infill, having the railing system built 100% offsite reduces product cost, improves product quality, and dramatically shortens installation time. For more information, visit agsstainless.com or call them at 888 842-9492. Thank you, AGS Stainless. So I'm here with Mahya Salehi of Mahya Salehi Studios. Mahya is a licensed architect based in California and the founder of Mahya Salehi Studio, established in January 2020. Prior to residing in California, Mahya spent her early childhood in Iran before moving to the UK for the second decade of her life. Mahya's multicultural background informs her diverse design language. Her design philosophy is rooted in the belief that architecture can enhance the human experience through intentional, curious, and deeply collaborative design processes. Beyond her professional pursuits, Mahya is committed to advancing diversity and inclusion in the architecture and design industry. Actively involved in mentoring and supporting emerging designers and architects, she is dedicated to creating a more inclusive future for the profession. Welcome, Mahya.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. Excited to have this conversation.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Friday is always my favorite day. So I just wake up in a better mood on Fridays.
That's great. Ah, so what are your first recollections of experiencing architecture?
So I was born in Mashhad in Iran, and my first recollection of architecture is the house that I grew up in, which I think is kind of also, infuses my love for residential architecture because it tends to be our first memory of being in a built environment. And I remember, my parents, they were students and came from modest backgrounds, and we lived in a rental apartment, but it was still the time where everything wasn't so dense and so curated to, top dollar of square footage amount. We had an atrium in the house that was between, the kitchen and the bedrooms, and was bringing this beautiful natural light from the sky and plants. And I just remember this very complicated and beautiful kind of movement of light in the space, even though I moved out of that house when I was 5. And I have these memories of just the quality of that space and being able to go into the kitchen and peek at the bedroom and see if my parents are up, or when the lights would go out, we would just sit around outside of that atrium and just have dinner with a candle under like the moonlight. It was just very, it wasn't fancy, it wasn't luxurious, but it was spaces that were intentional. And I think that that's what I remember the most about my first architectural experience.
Very romantic. Sounds very romantic.
And it was very typical. I remember most houses that we would go to would have a courtyard or an interior atrium. It was very much expected that you have some indoor outdoor space, and somewhere along the way that was cut out to maybe add another bedroom, right? So it's less, and you see that less and less, but at the time, we'd go to friends' houses, and all the kids, we would be riding our bikes inside the house, like inside the courtyard, very safe. There was no street access or cars. And it was really great to be able to really experience that indoor outdoor lifestyle without it having being this 1% kind of deal where only a very limited few can afford it. It was accessible to most people when I was growing up.
And then was the apartment on each level there was an atrium?
Okay. Yeah, So it was like a 3-story building. The downstairs, they were the owners and they had a backyard. So the atrium started on our level. And then the level above us, my dad actually was mentioning that he had to go talk to the upstairs neighbors to put a film on the windows, just like a frosted screen, because they could look down at our courtyard. So there was a little bit of there was room for improvement for sure.
Well, that's the way it is with it, right? I mean, like even right. I don't have blinds or anything on my windows, right? But my brother came here to live here for like 1 year, and he immediately had to put a blind on the window in the bathroom. Well, I'm tall, and I'm like, nobody's looking at you. Nobody's looking at you. The people next door aren't interested in you.
Right. They like put the window in, and if someone wants to put blinds, they can, but like don't take out the window. Don't take out.
Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of times people say, oh, well, we can do obscure glass, and I'm like, oh, so it's a window you still can't look out of. It's just obscure. It's like there is kind of a way that yes, in some cases like it's fine to use obscure glass, but sometimes it just drives me crazy, like with obscure glass, because you can't, it is a window, but you can't see out of it. Yeah.
I try to avoid it for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And exactly, just like what you said about how, you don't, then you don't have a window in your house, right, to look out. And so it's like you're actually punishing yourself rather than doing anything. It's like you're
limiting your options, right?
You're limiting, yes, the quality of your experience. Yeah. So what are 3 classic buildings that you like and why?
So I think every architect would have a hard time narrowing it down, but I thought I could just focus on Iran, if you don't mind, because that is so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it informed so much of how I think about architecture and spaces. And I don't know if did you know about this Roman Empire trend that was going around? Like, what is your Roman Empire? Like, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? And people were saying that like once a week, and it became this entire like scenario that went absolutely viral a few months ago. And people started talking about what it is that you kind of just comes to your mind randomly, like you think about it once a week or some often place or thought. And apparently men think about the Roman Empire a lot more than we think. But
I don't believe that. I don't believe it, Maya. I don't.
Right. I think they say it just for clout, but I think that these buildings to me are kind of fall in the same category where I just kind of randomly throughout the week find myself thinking about them and the experience of them. And the first one it was kind of hard to choose. There's a city in central Iran. It's called Kashan, and it's a very hot climate. And there are beautiful houses. There are houses very similar. So I picked the Abbasi house to kind of share with you. But there are many similar to that in that specific area. And what I really love about this house is so many things. If you think about like just the hierarchy of the spaces and the way that they define entryways, in this region of Iran, when you're walking in the street, you're seeing these very minimal kind of openings towards houses. It looks more like, single story garden walls. And you have really no idea about this scale of what you're about to encounter as you move through this entryway that is, I would say 1 or 2 people can get in at a time for the first few feet until you get to that entry foyer, and then it rotates you. So all of that is so intentional to, if you have, this was a time where people would do business from their house and you would be living multi-family, like multi-generations in the same household. And so if you have someone knocking at the door, inquiring for business, you don't want them to see your most private courtyard in the house. And it's so well integrated into how, there's rotations that you can notice on the floor plan, but when you're in the space, you don't really notice that you've been turned and moved around in this very intentional way. And when you get to this vast kind of courtyard, all around there are these different scale rooms that each serve a function, and they are seasonal rooms. So in kind of that traditional Iranian architecture, you would have like the summer lounge and the winter lounge, and you would have the summer courtyard and the spring room. And so there was so much awareness of how the experience of this house would change throughout the year and throughout the time of the day, and in different scales of interactions, whether you have a party or if it's just us, we're not going to be in the same space necessarily. And so I think that's so interesting that, this was built in 1830. Having so many layers of attention to the experience of the user, and that when the house is built so that it's lower than the street level, you're kind of going down an entire floor in your entry experience. So, and this is also like the luck of just the soil that is there. It's suitable for being used as a building material. So the way that the house is built is that they excavated that entire ground and then use that soil to make bricks to build the house. So it's the most vernacular architecture you could find. And as the excavation was happening, there's a group of people making the bricks and putting them in the kiln and preparing it for building. And there's things happening at the same time. And there's beautiful ornate decoration everywhere in this building, but it is with the same material. So it's carved brick, carved plaster, mirror work. And it feels very beautiful and visually interesting, but that's only like the surface. It's so well thought through, and has held, it's definitely, it's in great condition. It's a hotel now. It's a boutique hotel.
Okay.
And there's restaurants and things that they've made out of the basement area, which used to be the staff kitchen and the cooler room and all that. So I really love that house, and it makes me think about how you can really, you can really think about how people are going to move through the space and in the different times of the year and make that intentional. So that was my.
And then are the spaces geared toward the spaces designed as far as, right, it's the orientation of the sun?
Yeah, it's orientation of the sun. And, Iranians at the time, I mean, this was in like post-Islam era in the 1800s. And it's like the Qajar dynasty. So they were very religious people. So they cared a lot about privacy for the women if they are unveiled and if they're just like walking around the house and someone comes in. So it's so much designed for being able to have these like communal spaces and private spaces, and that there are multiple courtyards, multiple porches on different levels. Every room has an indoor-outdoor quality. There are rooms that have these beautiful sun, the moon, crescent mirror work on the ceiling. And it's meant that when you are, there with candlelight, it would create this like night sky above you. It's very romantic and poetic, but at the same time, super functional.
Yeah. It's fine. I was underneath potential clients like house yesterday, right? Because it's going down the hill. And then I said, and she goes, well, could we, right, everybody, you know how it is. It's like, can we dig all this out? And then and I'm like, yeah, you can dig it out, but we have all this dirt. We'd have to get the dirt up the hill. And, it's probably better if we do it over here. So I think I'm going to suggest to somebody that like, or we could just make bricks out of that. just to see what they say. Yeah. Just to see what they say. I'm just going to be like, what? I haven't seen that on Pinterest. It's like, it's
right. And like that level of innovation and in labor, and skilled labor, like I don't know your experience, but I have a hard time finding, skilled craftsmen that can do a lot of these ideas that might be a little outside of the norm, but I think that was a great era for that,
It takes a while to train them to do those things. I mean, there's one guy that did work. I mean, I didn't have to tell him that, but then also the client was very involved and had built other things before. And so he was really good with some of the, with some of the details that went, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just like, You're like, whoa, why didn't you ask me about that? Like, why did you do it? And then why did you redo it 2 times after that and still not ask me about it? But but the contractor that does most of my work and he's done work on my house, which is like still right. My project was like still half done on the back wall of my house, but he had done this trim around the door, which I basically had to do a certain way because I didn't want to rip all of the paneling off the wall. So I had just made like a kind of a big, it's like a super trim, right? Like they're really big. But when I first came in and saw it, I said, oh yeah, just put the trim around the door. We're gonna have to cover up this part, and then it'll just be like this really like trim on steroids or something like that. It's in my bedroom. Around these French doors.
Mhm.
And I came in and I saw, and he had left like these edges on the side, and I'm like, oh, why did you leave the edges on the side? And he goes, because it's easier to cut them off later than to add them on now. I'm like, you know what? That you are finally learning.
Yeah, the headaches, right?
So what's the second building?
Right. So the second building, we're going into non-residential. This is a mosque. It's in Shiraz in Iran, and the technical name is Nasir al-Mulk Mosque. But if you haven't seen it, you can just Google Pink Mosque in Shiraz, and it comes up because it's probably the most famous one. It's not the biggest by any means, and it's not the grandest in terms of even the architecture, but it is the most captivating space that I've ever been in. If there was a space that I could say has really nailed like elevating your soul, like when you're in there, you feel like you're really having this higher than me kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even religious. I feel like that's kind of what's interesting is that it's a mosque, but it's geared towards, having that religious experience, but you just feel elated to be there. And there's a huge crowd of tourists every morning because again, it's very much oriented towards that morning sun angle where people are coming together for morning prayer. There's this vast stained glass windows within these archways that bring in the most beautiful colored light, and the rays are just so dramatic. And the inside has this like deep blue tile on the floor and beautiful pink tiles everywhere. It's just an experience, and I think it's one that makes me feel more courageous with color and with patterns. And, I feel like as contemporary architects where there isn't so much precedence. I don't know about, how to kind of bring a little more soul and life into these very contemporary projects we're doing. And I just keep going back to these, I keep going back to these buildings that I'm like, well, this actually felt good. And somewhere along the way, they try to convince me that it's not. And I don't agree.
I know. Yeah. And then when I do have a client that like wants color, it's just like it's like too much. And like, okay, can we just like compromise? Like, let's just use this much of it. But sometimes it's like, okay, it's their project, right? It's like, this is what they want, this is what they like, this is what they're gonna live in, this is what they kind of wanted. And I was like, okay, fine. One of my clients was 11. Yeah.
Absolutely.
She wanted this.
I think oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think it's not natural to me. Like it doesn't come naturally in my design to like infuse a ton of color. And that's why I'm fascinated by this idea that like there's color on the glass and then the light is doing the rest of the work. Like the inside isn't that colorful other than the one monocolor blue tile on the ground. And so I feel like that's interesting. And then like after that morning sun is gone, the room doesn't have that quality anymore. It just feels very different again. So and to add the architects that designed this mosque, it kind of gives you a little insight about how things worked back then. This one's also from the 1870, I think, was when it was built. The two architects, their names really literally translate to the architect of Shiraz, or like the tile maker of Shiraz, because it was so like multi-generation within the family. It was so much about like learning the trades that get passed down. You're just born into a family of architects, and that's what you do. And you do your apprenticeship, and you pay your dues until you can design your own thing. But I just love the fact that their last name is their trade. And that's, I think, is really, really great to think about architecture as this kind of family, as this kind of family legacy that you're kind of raised to be a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what's the third one? Those are like fairly recent right? I mean, like 1870, that's new.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is for Iran. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's when they allowed themselves to do a little more, I don't know, have a little more fun with it. I think that era they didn't take themselves as seriously as the guys before. And they were like, it's pink tile, and it was done by, I
don't know. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there used to be the, right? Like pink was a male color.
Yeah. I mean, I think it should be. I think
pink was a male color. Yeah. And I think blue was for girls or something like it was. Really? It was switched. It was switched. And then at some point it's like they switched it and decided that pink was like for girls and not for, I mean, I don't know, but I believe that was like around the
Oh, fascinating.
1800s. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'll look it up and put it in the blog part or something. But yeah. It used to be that like little boys were dressed in pink.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
I love that. So we'll just see when it switched and it became kind of like this other color that meant right, that was like a more feminine color as opposed to like a more masculine color or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I believe and it was it was in England too that it was like that. That's kind of like when it changed also. So I think like from maybe Victorian times and some part of Victorian. Mm-hmm. So it probably had something to do. I mean, it could have been that it was from.
I think, Iran has
ran and then came to England, right? Because during that time they became more fascinated with, things from the Middle East and from abroad and from the Orient. Yeah.
I think there was a lot of that. I mean, it's when the trades was like thriving the most in history, right? There was a ton of like the Silk Road going through Iran. There was a ton of like east to west kind of travel and trade, and people were wealthy. These are all kind of privately commissioned buildings. So you're just seeing this boom of just craftsmanship again, and like taking 10 years to do a building, and try convincing someone to spend 10 years because you want to hand paint every tile. Like, it's just like a different economy. It's a different time. But it definitely presented some fascinating opportunities.
One of my friends, I'm doing a project for her, and we're doing a ceramic studio and then an ADU on top, but she's doing she's making all of the tiles. Wow. For her project. So of course she started them like 6 months ago. She started to make them because they're all, I think I have them. I should put them on my website too, because they're all only like this big. They're small.
Oh, that's great. Is it for the exterior or interior?
Interior.
Okay. I thought you're tiling.
Maybe she's going to put some of them on the interior, on the exterior, but I think it's going to be mostly, I don't think she's going to put them all the way around the pool. I don't think she's going to do that. I think it's going to be on the interior and the kitchen area, and then her bathroom area, and then also she's going to have one of those. She has a hanging fireplace, which of course we're going to put in after the fact,
right?
Because you can't do those anymore. So yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah. So
great.
And then what's the third building? Did we do three? We didn't do three.
No. So the third building is it's in Tehran. It's Azadi Tower. So it is a building, but it's really better known as a monument. It's in the middle of the biggest kind of I think it's the biggest city kind of roundabout, or city square, I guess you'd call it here. It's big. It has a ton of space around it. It's the monument and the landscape, and it's where Iranians have gathered throughout time, like the modern, So a little background: it was built in 1966 or around then, and it was actually a competition. So prior to the current revolution, so the Islamic regime is now kind of holding Iran in siege. But before that, before the revolution, there was a king, and they were celebrating 2,500 years of the Persian Empire. So they held this competition to architects to design this monument, and it was called Shahyad, which translates to the memory of the king. And the architect of this structure, his name is Hossein Amonat. He lives in Canada now. He, at the time, was on his last year of his undergrad program at the University of Tehran. And he was like looking for jobs and, trying to kind of start his career. He saw this competition, and out of his bedroom with a few of his college friends put together a proposal and won. And it's amazing, it's very much, it's a contemporary piece of architecture that is very much influenced by the history of the people and the architecture native to the area. And what I think is fascinating about it, so it was built as the memorial of the king. Shortly after, there was a revolution, very much anti-king. And the revolution was backed by the majority of the population at the time. I think everyone was holding their breath. Like, is this going to be live on TV? We're going to burn down the king's monument, as a political stance. But people loved it. People loved this building, and they appreciated what it was adding to the city. And despite this kind of extreme political overturn and the fact that this building was directly associated to kind of the king and that political movement, it held its own, and it was protected by the people because it was accepted by them. And I think that is something that I think about often. I think about that, the idea that it kind of went beyond who kind of commissioned it and what it was meant for initially. And maybe if it wasn't so loved, it wouldn't be there anymore. And it's still
an architecture that's able to transcend political, politics. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's where people gather when they're protesting and have, or if Iran wins a football game, it's just like that place that most big cities have it, right? And that's the spot to meet everyone. And I just love the idea that it was a very young architect, just kind of went with these ideas. Arup Group actually did the structural engineering for it. And so they kind of brought engineers from, outside of Iran to figure out how to do this crazy geometry, and they made it happen. And I'm fascinated by the courage that took and by how it stood the test of time.
Good. So when did this happen in Iran?
The revolution, 1970.
Yeah.
70. Oh God, people are going to kill me if I don't get this right. I think it was the 75.
Yeah, because there were when I was in kindergarten, which I was in kindergarten in 1969. So that's the reason why I was asking. So there were two kids that lived like a half a block down that had moved there, and I thought that for some reason their parents were studying here. But they were from Iran. And it was Dariush and Miriam. And so like he was my age, and then she was like 2 years younger, just like my brother and I. And so that's why I was like wondering why maybe they were here because of that, and then maybe they went back or something. It
was a multi-year process, right? So
the
leader, Khomeini, was exiled to Paris. He lived there. and kind of was, leading the revolution from France until the king left and the people were like, all right, come back. And there was a whole ordeal, but that was in 1978. So we've been under this kind of Islamic regime since then.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, you always kind of wonder, like, where do they go? Right. I mean, like it's like, I don't know. I mean, I write it on their last names, so I can't look them up on Facebook or something like that. They're,
maybe a little hear it, Michelle, and reach out. You never know.
Maybe. I did have some person that was, that flew home from, that was coming to visit their sister or something in California. It was he's in Italy, and his daughter, he was talking about like, his daughter was like asking him about America, and he's like, oh yeah, I went there when I was like 13 or something. And then he said, yeah, I went on an airplane, and there was this woman that was like coming back, and she's like, oh, let's look her up on the internet. And they looked me up and sent me.
That's awesome.
That's when the internet is
used for good. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, I mean, it's like I see every once in a while or whatever. He's in one of the, it's in Italy, but it's close to the Swiss border. So he's like in the mountains there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. With his family and his wife and his kids and stuff. Yeah. 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 You never know.
You do.
So what do you like about being an architect?
I love designing. I wish I had more time to do that, right? I feel like that's where they really got me. I thought that's what the gig is when I signed up. But now
I know we all wish. Yeah.
Right. I feel like now we have to say, like, I love working. I mean, I do. I love working with clients. I love building things. I love making things that, last, and you can kind of see the fruit of your labor. I think it helps with my once in a while, like, crisis of like, what are we doing on this planet? What are we here for? And then I'm like, well, I'm here to make buildings. And it kind of settles my anxiety a little. But I don't know. I feel like genuinely the times that I'm most excited is when I can close my door at the studio and say, like, I want an afternoon where I can just draw. And I don't get to do that as often as I want.
No.
And I don't know if the scarcity of it has made it so desirable for me. But right now, that is it's my motive, is to be able to carve out as much time as I can to do the creative process.
Mm-hmm. And I only feel like I can really do it because I work out of my house and I've got people around me all the time, that I can only do it in the middle of the night, which I started doing when the kids were little and they were asleep. And so then I would work like these late hours, but I really do feel like I'm the most creative from like 11 to 2.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, they say it's not good for your health, or I think if you just sleep in or something until, I think that you're at least getting like 8 hour, right? It's like you can try to get 8 hours sleep, but yeah, I mean, I do just feel like the most creative, being able to like take a concept and like really explore it and go with it. And I feel like a lot of times I'm just limited and I don't really get to do that, get to really express myself in the ways that I want to. And so that's kind of the way, that's the reason why I think a lot of people, a lot of architects want to do design build, or they do, create like these beautiful, drawings that really aren't the drawings that we build from. They're just these drawings that, that we would love to be able to,
for our own hearts.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's so interesting you said that, because I find my best work happens late at night as well. And I think that since we've kind of expanded our team and are more in like a studio mode, it's been harder to do that because by the time I get home, I'm pretty much done. But I feel like, I wonder what that's about, right? I feel like it's maybe like the pressure is off. Like it's not a time that you need to be productive or really like you're not on the clock. So I feel like that's an interesting kind of tension between, productivity and billable ratios. And then the creative process is like it wants to kind of push back on all of that. So maybe, intuitively we're like, this time isn't meant to be productive. So I can actually be creative without my brain saying that I should be like billing hours, So maybe it's that. Maybe it's like no pressure.
But we should be billing for those hours too. We should be billing for those hours too.
I mean, yeah.
Because that's the real, right? That is the thing. I mean, when people talk about AI and all these other things, it's like, you know what? It's not about AIA. It's about AIA. That was a Freudian slip. But anyways, it's not about the AI. It's about how our brain works and the creative process. And if you read any books about like the creative process, and then across the board, there are many people from different, writers and poets and artists and painters. And, it's like so much of the time it's their creative process about how they do things and like when they're doing them and like how they're arriving at these, at that kind of, kind of like the product or whatever, how they're arriving at this is very much the same for many different creative professions.
And that's fascinating, right? I it's something that circles my mind a lot about kind of the culture of the architectural, industry, about us being constantly overworked, constantly like, running out of time and tired and sleepless and all that you hear about. Like this is kind of how we know the culture, and it's accepted to be that way. But it's completely against what like you said, any kind of creative person who's been successful and you study their work or the way of thinking, it's that kind of lack of or like that space that you hold to not be busy is where you can be creative. So how are we expected to do both, right? And then you end up having offices that have like 100 people just drafting away, and there's 2 people that have the capacity and the time and space. And then, the kind of the verdict is that only these 2 people are good at designing. Well, how about you decrease the workload of the people that are doing 60 hours of drafting a week? And maybe they are great designers, but they're burnt out and they can't have the same like creative juices that a principal with, could have with more bandwidth. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I've always worked at small firms, so I don't even know what it's like to work at a big firm. I don't know what it's like to work at a place that's more than 15 people. I mean, I don't know, so it's like, I look at, I was at Patrick Ty's office, last week, and I went to architecture school with Patrick in Denmark, and at that time he was an art major. He wasn't even an architecture major at that time. But I went to his office, and it's just like, it's like this great office, and I just think, there's only like 15 people in there, and I'm just like, oh, like this is great. This is a great space. This is a great office, and I like think like, would I ever want to be in, and then there's people right in, and you're thinking like, oh, why do you, and then somebody from a bigger office was like saying, oh yeah, I would like to get people from their office. I'm like, why would they ever leave his office? I said, I wouldn't leave his office. I would be working there the whole time. I said, I wouldn't leave his office to go and work for your office. I said, it's like, I wouldn't be able to work so many people around or do anything, and I was kind of telling, Patrick, I said, it's funny because, and I mean, like Olson Kundig has 250 people in the office, but it's kind of broken down and things. But Patrick was like, "Wow, there's 250 people in Olson Kundig's office." And he said, "Yeah, supposedly. I mean, that's what he told me. So,
right.
So I believe him. But also kind of that Stephen Hall was saying. That the most miserable he ever was when he had 75 people in his office. And he goes, there's no way that I would ever have that. He's like, no, I would never have. He goes, I'd rather keep it small, no more than 30, and just like farm out the CDs and stuff to a bigger office, on these bigger projects, and I'm kind of with them on that. I mean, I know maybe the big firms won't like me saying that, but that's what I feel.
Yeah. And whenever we are looking to hire, most of the people that apply are applying from these bigger firms, and there are, they're burnt out by the culture of the bigger firms. So I do think it's like what we do, it's in the residential world, actually, it's very intentional, like we need to have the bandwidth and the space to think. And then that can't happen, even if you're 3 people, but you're overworked and you believe that the hustle culture is the right way to go with about architecture. I feel like I know people that assume like if you are not losing sleep and pulling out your hair, then maybe you're not doing it right. And I don't know if that's if that's necessarily true and helpful to our process.
Yeah, I know that there's also people like, oh, if you don't wake up at like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning or something, like, oh, you're not really working.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I am working. I'm like working all the time. I said, I have like that, right? I said, if I'm on my phone, I'm working. It's like, I'm not just like sit there. I'm like doing something on my phone. I'm doing social media. I'm like responding to an email. I'm looking up products or whatever. And I said, there's just, it's like we're always working. It's just different, it's a different work
Mhm.
style. And I think it's fine. I mean, we're making it work, right? We're making it work. I mean, your work is beautiful. There's like nothing, I don't think that you could look at your work and think, God, she's never doing anything. Like, what is she doing?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's the voice in my head.
I think that some people like, I don't know. I mean, I've kind of heard, right, when I was younger and I had, and I've told this story before, and I had a baby and some guy walked up to me at an art opening and it was actually in Michael Philonas's office. And I was renting a desk in Michael Philonas's office in Santa Monica, and I had a baby. And there was actually another one of my friends, well, we became friends, we weren't even friends at the time. And she had her baby. And then this guy like said, oh, so what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm an architect. I said, but I just gave birth. I mean, my daughter was like only a few months old or something. And he's like, oh, he goes, well, what are you going to do? And I said, what do you mean? What am I going to do? And he goes, well, you're not going to be able to practice architecture. But I said, he's like, how are you going to practice architecture? And I'm like, well, I'm going to practice architecture and I'm going to raise my baby. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. He goes, well, I would never be able to do architecture part-time. And I'm like, you don't have to. You can do whatever you want to.
And he probably he probably couldn't handle both, It's like that, in those cases, I'm like, well, that's really sad that you can't do both, but I can, All right.
So what would you like to say about the future of architecture?
I think we're kind of on the same kind of conversation. Like, I think the future of architecture, or maybe the present, kind of what I'm seeing or sensing, is I feel like I see less stylistic moves in architecture, rather than being like, well, we're in the era of doing this kind of architecture exclusively, and this is what's in and what's out, and this is what's out. I see less of that, and I think that's great. I think there are so many different types of architects that can each serve their own clients, and I feel like, again, it kind of lifts the pressure of having to conform to this arbitrary set of rules, and maybe that's across industries, right? All the creative industries are taking a hard look and kind of questioning everything, like, why are we doing it this way? And as women in architecture, I'm fascinated by how the women's movement and how our approach to our careers and our lives are also changing the way that architecture is experienced. And the more we bring minorities and women and people of different backgrounds to the table, it's going to just completely change the way that we think about our built environment and how we shape our environment. And I think it's happening. I'm not typically like, I feel like I'm a realist when it comes to these things, but I see it, and I think it's kind of it's kind of, architecture has always echoed what the society has been most concerned about at that time. And I think right now we're at the time where we're just questioning why we were told to do things a certain way, and why that there was these certain expectations of what this is and what that is. And when we're in that era, you don't really know what's going to come out of it, but I think it would be something more authentic and more true. The people like my team, everyone's very concerned about the climate. We're concerned about social justice. We're concerned about things that I heard less about growing into the architecture world. And, even if it's just that we're trying to make sure the materials that we use are a little better for the environment. It's, I mean, we can't change the world, but through this, but I think it always echoes what people are concerned about. And it's an interesting, it's always kind of like, it's something that you can look back and see what it was, but you can't really see it when you're in it. Right. Like, that's always really great to kind of look back at like what the pandemic did to architecture, right? I don't think we'll know till maybe 10, 20 years from now. And then we can kind of see the thread of how that influenced it. And, I feel like there's like all this conversation about technology, and I was listening to your episode with Tom, and he was talking about, how rapidly technology has changed through his career of being on Mylar paper. And then now like I established my company in 2020. It hasn't even been that long, but like every year there's like something that where we want to understand and be on top of, and, we're trying to like incorporate VR into our client presentations, and in doing that, it's like opened up a whole new way of doing client presentations for us that is very much not about the floor plan anymore, because it's like you get to experience it and then you look at the floor plan for reference. So it's changing how I design and think and present. And I think that's going to happen across the board, where our clients are going to demand to kind of experience it before they sign off on it. And maybe that's a good thing. It results in less changes, in less like knocking things down in 5 years and rebuilding, because we had no idea what the ceiling height actually means. Like how many times do you hear things like that where it's like, we were okay with this.
What's 10 feet? Yeah. What's 10 feet? Well, what does 12 feet look like? Well, what's about 9 feet? Well, what about the doors? Like, should we go 7 feet? Should we go to 9 feet? That's that's like that's an ongoing conversation.
Right. And it's always like you're kind of nervous, right? You're like, well, I think this is a good like proportion for this space, but I don't know your psychology and what you find to be great. So we just have this like unwritten kind of agreement that we're just going to roll with what I assume is great. And then hopefully you feel that way in framing and then not want to change things, but now it's like, it feels more collaborative. You want me to try with an 8-foot ceiling. It's a touch of a button, like feel it, like how does it feel now? And I don't know. I have projects under construction that we didn't have this technology when we were in the design process. And I'm seeing the difference of like, compared to projects that we're right now in schematic design and how much more comprehensive it could be. So it's changing like year by year. So I don't even know where technology is going. We're just on this ride.
I don't use VR, but I do have a friend that's in Arizona where they, he used to work for a company. I don't know whether I'm sure that he still has I'm sure they still do VR even from his point. But yeah, I mean, they started using it like even before maybe 2019, 2018 with a lot of their clients, and in some ways I think that the other thing is that I do think, I mean, people get some idea with VR, but I do think that unless they're actually in that space, they don't know exactly what it's, it can give them an idea, just like a perspective, just like a rendering, it can give them an idea, but until they're actually in that space, they're not understanding also that we can understand it, right? We understand like what that's going to be. And I think that there has to be some level of trust with them that that doesn't always, I mean, I think, I think more people should trust their architects to make these decisions, to kind of do it instead of instead of it being this fight that they're trying to force them. Like, well, no, we've been doing, we've done, like, we know that this is your first or second house, but we've done like 100 in the last like 10 years or something, right? It's like, it's like you have to trust that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you think you're spot on. Like, to me, like, maybe it's just a little more easy to digest for a homeowner than like a floor plan or a render, but it's not at all like the same experience. But it's kind of like our litmus test, right? It's kind of, you can get into it and maybe it's not even the whole project, but if there's one area that you are asking, like, do you think this window is too big or too small, or and to me, there's so much of residential architecture is so subjective. I mean, we work with clients from very, very different backgrounds, different like, and I've done projects where I've like, gone into the first like design meeting, and I'm like, I think we should do this like brick perforated wall, and it's going to be amazing, and it's like makes so much sense for this space. And my client's like, well, I grew up in a house with a brick perforated wall back in like where I was, and I hated that experience of living in that house. And so that's a like no for me. And I'm like, well, there was no way that I would have ever known that, like, no matter how many conversations we've had. But that's why it's a collaborative process. And that's like, it's always funny to me how everybody has these like things that they really like or really hate. And it's always like, well, of course I really hate this. But then the next hour I have a meeting with a client that absolutely loves the thing that the last hour person didn't love. So so I try not to be the one that's like, well, this is good or this is bad, because it's like, no, I'm your architect. I want to make your vision come true. And I'm going to guide that process to the best of my knowledge. But I'm not going to be like, well, I don't care. Get over your childhood. This is what it is.
Well, I think sometimes, I mean, the thing is that this is like somehow related to this, but one of my friends, they were trying to adopt a child. And so this person, they went into one interview, and the person said, and my friend said like, oh, this is my name. And the mom, right, because it was a story where that, they could choose whoever they wanted, said, I hate that name. And so I said, so she's like, okay, I guess we're not getting this kid, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's like, you just don't know what is in people's heads sometimes. I mean, maybe there are these, kind of like client questionnaires, and it's like, maybe you can add this brick perforated wall to, to like the questionnaire list. I don't use those. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, oh, maybe I should. I don't know.
Right. And we have a questionnaire that has questions, and I'm always trying not to like bore the clients like too early with this like homework task that is just, go write this down for 2 hours. But we try to ask these questions. But I think what is really awesome about like working with homeowners is that they don't even know a lot of this until it's presented to them. And I think the best clients are the ones that are curious and like interested in that. And they can say like, I've never thought about what kind of shower experience, but now I have these like stories, or this like hotel that I went to like 20 years ago had this feature. And they're just going to bring in all of these like experiences and stories that enriches the design process, and then excites them even more because they can see the level of input that they can have. And I think that's why I honestly, like, I can't see myself getting away from residential. I'm too in love with that aspect of it. And I think it's harder to find in other kind of client types.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you wanted to say?
I think we've covered a lot. No, I really appreciate this. And I know that we've been wanting to do this since like last July, and from the the AIA conference, but that just says, how busy everyone is, and we are. And I'm glad that we made it happen, and it's been fun.
Oh my gosh. Maya, you know what? I have to tell you, because I like said this to the people. So you came up to me after the after you spoke, and you said, and I said, oh, after you spoke at the AIA CRAN forum, and then a couple of us were talking afterwards, and we realized that we had all been in Los Angeles at the same time. And then I said to you, I said, oh yeah, I said, we realized that we were all in Los Angeles at the same time, Angie Brooks and the person that's now in Utah, the other person that was speaking there, I forget, her and her husband have a practice. And then there was the other woman that I know through Lowen that has, I forget her name. Anyway, I'll put it in the blog. But anyway, it was just interesting. We were working at these different offices, and and Jolie Wallace, we were all, and then you said, thank you for helping to pave the way. And I was so floored. I was like, wow. Oh, okay. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, your work is so great. Like, what does she have to say? I mean, I don't even think that I've done anything in the world to help with that. But anyway, I went over to do my AIA profile thing or whatever, and she started asking about stuff, and I just started crying.
Oh, bless.
Laughing. I was laughing when I was crying. And I'm like, okay, I said, I know that when you ask me this during the video, I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm not going to be crying when you ask me that same question that you were just asking me about. And then they did it again. And then I started crying, and I'm like, okay, I hope you can edit that out of the video.
Oh my goodness. Well, I
so when they finally
meant it. Yeah.
Then when they finally they right, they don't give us a preview of the video that they give. They just have the video. Yeah, they just I mean, I literally found out when it was posted, and somebody was like, oh, there's this video posted of you. And then that's when I found out what it even looked like. And then I looked at it, and I was like, oh my gosh, what did they put in it? So that I went through and I'm like, okay, that's good. I'm not crying. So that's what I had put in the note, in the comments or whatever. Oh, good. I'm glad you could edit out my crying in the thing. People are like, what are you talking about? It was very emotional. So thank you, thank you for saying that. And
Absolutely. And I think, it's from the bottom of my heart when and anytime I see women in the architecture business that has been in it longer than I have, I think about it would be so much harder for me to be here now had it not been for the women who knocked down those doors, and I can sit here and say yeah, there is hardship being a woman in this business, and it is, but I can't imagine how it was in, the 90s or 80s. I just can't imagine it. I mean, I think about that. I think about all the people before me that had the courage and the audacity to say no, and to have a baby and have a job and do that then maybe someone now won't ask me how are you going to do both, because they've seen you do it and they see that it's possible. And I think that's really important that we model it, that it is possible. So I really do appreciate it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, even the people, right? I mean, Denise Scott Brown, they used to ask, somebody asked her, when she went into one of the first interviews, they said, it's don't you think that was very unprofessional of him to bring his wife to the interview? Because they didn't realize that even though she was there talking.
Wow.
She didn't realize that she was there as part of the team. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. It still happens at least once a month. Someone calls the studio, and I if I'm here, I usually try to pick up the phone, and they'll say can I speak to the architect? And I'm like, which part of Mahya sounds like a guy? You have to really override the information in front of you to assume that I can't be the architect. But it's fun. It's always fun. I think now we can kind of make light of it because it's not so much of a barrier. But when it was I can't imagine the additional mental load of fighting for your right to be in the room. It's crazy, but I hope it gets better, and I think it will.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it will. Yeah. Or going to an interview one time that I was working for a structural engineer. And so he was sending me to this, any work that came in that was architecture, he would say, hey, do you want to do it? Right. 'Cause it's not a conflict of interest or whatever, because we don't do architecture here. So I would go and interview. And so one of the things I went and I was pregnant, but of course I wasn't going to say anything about it. And so, sometimes people would ask me like, oh, are you pregnant? Because they didn't want to hire me if they saw that I was pregnant. And so they actually asked the structural engineer, they called up and they asked if she was pregnant. Yeah. And so it's like, I tell that story, and to people your age, right, that you're like, why would they ever do, it's like, that's ridiculous. But then it was just like, yeah, that was just natural for them to say that. They could say that they didn't really care. They didn't think that was outside of their bounds or anything. And then the other thing is that like, I still wouldn't be able to do it just because I was pregnant. And so I would say like, oh, well, my husband's an architect, right? A lot of times I just say my husband's an architect, even though, he was an architect, but we never did any work together. And so I would just say that. And then they like had this like sigh of relief.
Well, if your husband co-signs this contract, then we're okay. It's like when you get a loan and you're like, well, your credit score isn't that great. But if your husband, but it's like, that's nothing to do. I know. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. When I hear things like that, all I can think is like, I'm so sorry that you've experienced that. I think that we have to remember that was real and that it happened, and that your experiences, it was hard and it still is, but we appreciate it. I think we all appreciate it.
Yeah. If we had a strong, right. My mom had bought a house at 21 when she was divorced and went to buy a house later on. She couldn't get a loan. You couldn't get a loan if you were a single woman.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents had to co-sign the loan for it. And the realtor who helped her was one of her friends, and she knew which mortgage company was opening and which one would give mortgages to women.
Wow. Yeah. And this is recent history. Like,
this is it. I know. Well, that's what I tell them, like, this is 1975, right? This is 1975. Yeah.
Well, we've made a lot of progress in a short amount of time. So, the sky's the limit. And I want to just be around to see an AIA conference that is more women than men, or like, I just want to see it. I just want to be around to just
yeah.
Time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, Mahya.
Thank you, Michelle. This was
thank you to and thank you to AGS Stainless for their sponsorship of the podcast episode. Thank you.